Hi, this is Larry Trennell, ISU Extension Dairy Field Specialist in Northeast and Southeast Iowa. The topic we're going to deal with now is basically we're still beginning grazing, what grazing is all about. There's a lot to learn as we try to instruct people on how to best learn about what rotational grazing is. There's just so many facets in the way of nutrient management and getting the forages harvested correctly to make sure we leave enough residue, and just a whole host of things, how to set up the lane systems, how to set up the fencing systems. And so when you take a look at the beginnings of rotational grazing, when we take a look at some of the most important parts are to make sure that the cattle have adequate intake. So we want to make sure we take care of the pasture plants first of all. So you can basically see that the cows are actually in an area right now that's pretty green being grazed, and the part that they came off with, you can kind of see how well it's actually grazed down. So we want to try to keep about a 3 to 4 inch stubble for the most part as the cows come through there, and basically that stubble allows for regrowth. So don't think of it as being wasted pasture, but think of it as regrowth in there. We also tend to want to try to do some back fencing with it as well, so you can really try to get these cattle to not just eat in a certain area, but to lay their manure and urine in a certain area, so we kind of try to work the nutrients with it as well. So the pastures that they're taking a look at just right here, you can see when you take a look at the body condition on the animals and just what every type of animal has a different, growth phase that they're in, whether they're lactating cows, bred heifers, or small dry heifers, or whatever. So when we take a look at the whole concept of the system, there's just a lot of facets to take a look at in order to properly graze. So it's not something that's just a novice can go out there and graze. There's actually a lot that actually goes into it. So let's listen to a little bit of a video clip about the proper aspects of grazing.
Okay, so this is part of a rotational grazing of dairy heifers. So it's a pretty simple system. It starts with having some of these reels, and basically it's just a simplified reel with some step-in posts that I can probably move a fence in less than 2 minutes. And so I've got my front fence here, and you can see the heifers are grazing right now. And usually when we graze heifers, we'll have them take about 2/3 of it down. If I'm grazing milk cows, I'm probably going to take half and leave half so I get the milk production. Right now they're actually grazing reed canary grass, which tends to be a little bit of lower quality but very high tonnage grass, but can tend to be actually very profitable as well. And so I call this line here, it's kind of my PMR, my feeder wagon, and so that's what I use to kind of ration out what the cows are going to be eating during that given 12-hour period. So even my dairy heifers are getting moved twice a day, every 12 hours or so. Back in the back was my back fence, so I call that my manure spreader. And so basically if you look at some of these fields, my goal is about every 3 years I'm going to get a manure patty about every square yard or so to really supply the nutrients versus having the nutrients underneath the tree or sitting here by the water. And so this way I get them very well dispersed. So I think that's a very key part of the grazing system. In addition, the cows aren't allowed to regraze what they've already grazed. So after 3 days and pasture starts regrowing back, they can't get back onto that grass, and they'll take some of that luscious stuff, and it really depletes the root systems of that piece of the grazing system there. So it's a pretty simple system. On these heifers here, and this is actually on an organic farm, but even if it wasn't organic, I probably would still do it this way with twice-a-day moves. I've clocked out about 1.8 pounds of gain on these bred heifers, and so I really don't have to feed any grain whatsoever. If I would feed grain, it's only for the reason to try to get some mineral or some, if it wasn't organic, rumensin or something that would serve as a bloat guard, because some of these pastures have also clear clover or a lot of other types of clovers and can be some very bloaty pastures as well. So it's just a way to kind of reduce the bloat incidence with it. The watering system is basically about 4,000 feet of water line that actually lays out down through the lane all the way through the top of the farm. And so you can see it's just basically a black water line, 1 inch, and it stays out here all winter. I just basically take the pressure off of it, open the valves that are down in the ravines, and let the water drain itself out. And over the course of about 8 years with this system, I've only had 1 or 2 breaks through the winter that take about $5 to try to fix up as well. So the water itself is only a 35-gallon barrel cut in half, or a 50-gallon barrel cut in half. with a full flow valve and a garden hose with the spigot, and so it's just something that I can just move from paddock to paddock as I want to try to do this. So it really is a pretty low labor system versus bringing heifers back to a barn or trying to find another source of water. It's a pretty cheap system for them to actually work with.
So while we're talking water, let's just move the barrel. So I just emptied the barrel out. It disconnected the garden hose that's attached to it. So I'm going to set it into the next paddock. I like to try to set it onto one of the corners or as far down as I can, so I don't need to change this water every day. Sometimes I'll change the water or move it about every 3 days or so, depending where that back fence is. So right now I'm just off trying to locate the next spigot, hose bib, and there I found it. So now we're going to connect the water hose. A lot of different types of connections that you can use for this. I just use the simple hose bibs and take the time to actually just screw the garden hose right onto it. Not a big problem or big deal for me to do it that way. So as I get that all screwed on, and then I'll always try to have pliers or something like that just to make sure that I get it nice and tight, or sometimes even open the hose bibs as things break off. It's nice to have pliers around to try to do that. So then we'll just turn the water on. And so again, as I mentioned earlier, it's a full flow valve. And so, this can actually serve up to 100 cows in a paddock. And as long as it stays with them all the time, only about 2 cows can actually get their heads in it at any given time. So it's difficult to work with it. So that's rotational grazing, a few more basics. Thanks for watching.